All right, welcome back to another episode of Black Sesame. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. My guest today is Rachel. Thank you for coming on the show. I know it's Sunday. Yeah. It's early. It's hot. Hopefully you're okay. Hopefully you're comfortable.
Oh, we're good. We're good.
And so, like I've mentioned off camera, the whole point of these interviews is just for me to talk to different Black people who live in Taipei to get their experience living in Taiwan. Mm-hmm. And so my first question for you, since we met through Instagram actually,
yeah.
so I actually don't know you very well, so yes, nice to meet you in person. And so where are you from?
I am from Kenosha, Wisconsin.
Kenosha, Wisconsin. Yes. Wow.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I don't think I've ever met someone from Wisconsin before.
Yeah. Well, my family's originally from Chicago.
Okay.
Yeah, we moved
up. You grew up in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how long have you been living in Taiwan?
About like a year and a half, I think.
Year and a half.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
My second year.
Second year. Okay. All right. Nice. And what brought you here?
So I am an English teacher,
mm-hmm.
and my degree is actually in English as a second language.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
And linguistics too. So one of my professors was actually Taiwanese.
Oh,
and
okay.
Yeah, I knew I didn't necessarily want to work in the U.S.
Yeah.
And I was looking at different countries. I was looking at China. I was looking at
mm-hmm.
Japan and Korea.
Mm-hmm.
But at the time, because I graduated in 2021.
Okay.
So it was still very much pandemic.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Korea, China, and Japan were all closed at the time, but Taiwan was not.
Right. Okay.
So I had already been here before.
Okay.
And my professor was like, "Yeah, I think like you should go for it." So then I just took the chance. But then as I like signed my contract and was gonna come, then like Taiwan shut down again for a while, so I had to wait before I actually ended up coming. But
okay. Okay, so you were saying that you visited Taiwan before you actually moved here. Okay, you said it was kind of like a tour of Asia when you came?
Yes.
Okay.
So at the time, I had family who was living in Korea,
mm-hmm.
and for a variety of reasons, we ended up, there was 2 weeks where I kind of just needed to be somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
So I was 19 at the time, and I was like, "Hey, Dad, like, you want to go to Taiwan?"
Mm-hmm.
He was like, "Sure." So we went for like about a week and a half.
Nice.
And we only stayed in northern Taiwan,
okay.
like the Taipei, Greater New Taipei area.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we were able to kind of get a visit of here, and then it was funny because 2 weeks later I ended up being in China for like a month.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I have like different experiences.
Different experience.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So moving to Taiwan, even though, like you said, visiting is different from living here,
yes.
but I guess moving here was not, was it a big shock when you moved here? Because you'd already been to Asia before, so.
I don't think it was a big shock. It was interesting because I moved prime pandemic, like,
right.
I moved in the 14 days of quarantine.
Oh, right, during that time.
Yeah,
okay.
So I think part of me was mostly just happy that I'm here.
Mm-hmm.
And I made it through essentially a month of quarantine.
Yeah.
Because by the time you got it was 15 days, not even 14, 15 days and then 7 days of isolation.
Self-monitoring. Yeah.
Whereas like you can't really go out.
Right.
So I was like, I'm just happy to be here. Like I'm outside of the United States.
Yeah.
I was just like, I was so happy.
Yeah.
But my first year, I actually lived in Rayfang, and for those who don't know.
Oh,
yeah.
okay. I when I take the train sometimes towards the beach, like Fulong Beach, I feel like
you
get past it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So if you've heard of like Jiufeng, that's
that area.
Yeah.
Oh,
that's
okay.
Yeah. So it's far, and I feel like just a note for people who possibly are moving more countryside, especially in the New Taipei area, because New Taipei is huge.
Yeah, it is.
A lot of people, I think, don't understand the geography of Taipei and New Taipei.
Mm-hmm.
And even when I signed on with my school, they were like, it's far. And I was like, yeah, but again, I'm an American. Like, an hour is like nothing.
Yeah, nothing. Yeah.
You're going to feel that hour. It's far.
Yeah.
It's far. It is really far from Taipei.
Mm-hmm.
And I really did enjoy my time in the countryside. It was great. But again, it's it's farther than you think.
Right, it
Yeah.
is really far. So
Yeah.
were you, and the school that you were teaching in, was it a Bushibon or was it a public school?
It was a public school.
A public school,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
And were there other foreign teachers at that school?
No, so I was working between two schools.
Okay.
And I was the first foreign teacher, kind of to start that program.
Oh,
for
wow.
them,
Okay.
which was a really, I think, great experience for me professionally, and a great experience for the schools too, because the schools were great. Actually, the only reason I ended up leaving those schools was because it was so far from everything.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, but other than that, like, it was such a great experience
That's
out there.
good.
The people were so nice and so kind, but it was far. So where I lived, my school was near Jiufeng, and then they had another campus on the other side of Ruifeng, at the bottom of the mountain, basically.
Okay.
Which I think is it was really beautiful out there. But yeah, traveling is like all bus out there.
Yeah, all bus.
Yeah. And then I had another school that was on the other side of New Taipei, basically on the other side of Geelong or Keelung City.
Okay.
So geography-wise, like, Keelung City's here.
Yeah.
And I'm aware, Taiwanese people say Geelong, but for this I'm gonna just say Keelung.
Yeah, I know Keelung.
But Keelung's here, Ruifeng's right here.
Okay.
And then the other district I was in was on the other side.
Gotcha.
So I had to
okay.
commute through Keelung,
Oh.
which was like an hour and a half
Yeah.
each way.
Yeah.
So it was a lot.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot.
It was a lot. I do that 2 days a week. It was a great experience.
Right.
But it was just like, wow, this is a lot of like 3 hours, basically 6 hours a week.
Right.
Of just travel.
Just travel.
Yeah.
Right.
So
right.
it was a lot, but I think there's a different side of, like, a different vibe when you're in the countryside of Taiwan versus being like in the city.
Right? Yeah. And did you have a lot of friends out there, or were
No.
you mainly no? Did you like meet people, or were you mainly just by yourself, kind of doing your solo thing? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, also to people, especially if you are Black or brown and you are in the countryside, I think it's really fulfilling, and it's nice. It's a great opportunity to work on your Mandarin. You can learn Taiwanese, because a lot of people speak Taiwanese in those areas.
Right.
But just know, you probably are gonna be like the only one there.
Yeah.
There are a few, like in my program, there's another person that was in Ruifeng, and I still talk to them, and they're South African. And so that was nice to have that connection. And I was telling them, I think there's a Black man that lives in Ruifeng.
Yeah.
So if like, you watch this, reach out. Reach out.
If you see your brother, reach out.
Because I swear, I would see you on, like, specifically on Sundays in the market.
Wow.
And the first time I saw it, I was like, it's a tourist.
Okay, yeah.
But then I saw him like 2-3 more times. Yeah. But it was always like we were too far for me to be like, hey, yeah. So yes, if you live out there,
hit her up.
Yeah, for real. It's like, I'm always looking for other people that live out there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think people in the countryside should know, you are gonna be by yourself. It still is really possible to make friends and really good friends.
Of course, yeah.
But usually, if you're in the countryside, you might be the only, like, basically non-white foreigner in that entire area.
Gotcha.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you said that if you live there, it's a good opportunity to work on your Mandarin.
Yes.
So how's your Mandarin? Is it?
I would
like,
say
are you conversational? Or?
I'm like semi-conversational.
Okay.
I
good.
have the survival stuff down.
Okay.
Yeah. So, it really pushed me, because a lot of people really don't speak English out there, and there's a lot of older people.
Right.
So it's like they speak Mandarin and Taiwanese. So, but they're really nice. They're really graceful with you. But I think it's really good to learn, at the very least, the basics, the survival, like how to order food, how to ask for basic directions, and then again, I think this goes for countryside like anywhere, but basic conversational things, because as people get to know you, they're gonna want to get to know you.
Yeah.
So being able to kind of talk about yourself a little bit, in Mandarin is like really a benefit.
Yeah.
For you, but I think it's cool because as you're able to push yourself, like you build certain connections with people. So like for me, for instance, as I would like commute through Keelung, there were like a few like old ladies that were like regulars on the same buses I would. They'd be like, "Oh, like sit with me," and like different things, and they'd like ask me. They would ask me about my hair.
Of course.
But they'd be like, "Oh, like you're so pretty, or you're so young."
Yeah.
And I think especially if you're a 20-something-year-old in, or even 30-something too. They're like, "Wow, you're really young. You're really brave. You're by yourself. Like we're gonna take care of you."
Yeah.
So yeah,
that happens a lot.
Yeah. So that's really nice.
Okay, and then was there anything specifically that prompted your move to New Taipei?
Again, I think it mostly just came down to the distance because I was making friends out here, which was fun, but it was like I couldn't really like go out and like have fun,
right?
Because I had to catch a train back
all
to
the way back.
Yeah. And while you could stay at like friends' house, a lot of like Taipei and New Taipei apartments are literally sometimes just a room.
Yeah, they're so small.
Yeah, so it was very much like I would hang out with a lot of friends during the day, and I could stay till a certain time, but then I'd be like, "Oh, guys, I have to like catch a train back." Yeah. So that was a little hard. I think socially, career-wise, I think I was doing fine, but I think socially and mentally, sometimes it was really just like hard to not have so many people, especially my age, because at the schools I was working at, I was the youngest. Like at my school in Ruifeng, I think I was the youngest at least by like 15 years.
Okay.
Yeah. There was one other girl who was around my age, and we were pretty good friends, but she was at the other campus that I would only go to once a week.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it was a little
that often anyway.
Yeah. So it was kind of hard. And again, they took really good care of me, but it's just like being around people my age, being able to kind of like be, because I'm only 23. At the time I was 22.
Oh, young.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was like, being able to be like a young 22-year-old was a little hard.
Yeah.
In the countryside. So that kind of was really like, oh, I want to move.
Right.
A little bit closer to the city, and I was like, I would like to at least be connected to the MRT.
Yes.
In some way.
Right.
That's the Taipei Metro. Yeah. That would be very good.
Yeah, helpful. Yeah. Okay, good. Okay, good. Well, I'm glad. Welcome. I'm glad.
Thank you. Thank you.
And how long have you been living and teaching New Taipei?
So I moved here in June.
June. Okay.
Yes, at the end of the Taiwanese school year. And then I went back to the U.S. in July.
Oh, okay. So you got to have a visit.
Yeah.
Okay, nice.
And then I've been here back since August. So.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, great. And so now that we're on the topic of teaching and schools and things, so again, we talked a little bit before about, now we're going to dive into it, about what it's like to, be a Black teacher or a teacher of color, here in Taiwan. And your background, you are Black and Filipino, right?
Yes.
So, and I know you said that, maybe in the U.S. you would identify more as like half and half, like mixed. Yeah. Do you use the term Blasian? Or not really? I feel like
not
only
really,
some people.
But I also like I don't care if like people
refer to you as that. Okay, just wondering.
Yeah.
Okay, but then here in Taiwan, how do you, especially with the students, how do you, when they see you, what do you think kind of goes through their mind? Are they confused? Are they curious?
Yeah.
Do they ask you questions?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are curious, and now that I've been in two different contexts, I think countryside was a lot of genuine curiosity, and a lot of like, oh, not only is this like a foreigner, but like I've never seen someone that looks like you. That's really cool.
Right.
Like, and they would ask questions, and I always welcome questions, because I think you can tell when someone's being genuine.
Yes.
Even if sometimes it's a little out of pocket.
Yeah.
They're like they don't mean it like
right.
that.
They're not trying to be offensive. They just want to know.
Yeah. But then in the city, I think a lot of people. Well, I think in general, a lot of people are like, we've never seen someone that looks like you. As well, you're not like Black, and I don't have darker skin.
Right.
I'm not white.
Right.
My hair is shorter.
Right.
So they're like, what's going on here? So I think while there's times where they would ask questions, I notice I don't get necessarily as much questions in the city. But then like, there's times I have to stop and be like, okay, let's talk about it. Because, like, you guys are distracted by my hair right now.
Yeah.
And then this is what my hair usually looks
Right.
like at this point. It's grown out, because when I first moved here, it was, like, way shorter. But I'll have students, like, I'm trying to teach, I'm out here doing this. And then, like, I look at them, and they're, like, looking at each other, they're like I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
And for those of you who don't know, in Taiwan, not only is it hot, it's very humid.
It is.
It's
very,
very, very humid.
Absolutely.
So sometimes this is like,
yeah.
and especially on those days, I think that's when kids are like, oh,
yeah.
what is it?
Yeah.
And then I'm like, all right, guys, so because I'm very open with them.
That's good.
About, I am like mixed. And there's a term, I'm not gonna say it because I think I'm gonna like butcher the pronunciation, but there is a term for like basically being half and half in Mandarin.
Okay.
Yeah. For people who are half. So they know that, and like they've seen pictures of my family. I did that in my introduction, and I'm like, yes. So like, my dad is a black man, my mom is Filipino. My hair looks like this because it's a mix.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they're like, oh, like, yeah, it's so pretty, and I'm like, thank you.
Yeah.
Like, let's get back to work.
Right.
I had to just take 5 minutes out of our lesson to like explain why my hair looks like this.
Yeah.
But I think while there is genuine curiosity, and also we didn't preface this, I teach middle school.
Okay, right. Yeah. So your students are like around 12, 13?
Yes.
Okay.
I would say, I think 13 to 15.
13 to 15, okay. Yeah.
So, but the group I primarily teach is like 13 and 14-year-olds.
Okay.
So they're kind of at that age where it's like a few things. One, they start actually just being mean.
Yeah.
And two, they're also at an age where I'm like, okay, well, you're old enough to know, like, this is mean versus this isn't.
Yeah. Right, exactly.
So, like, we've been dealing with certain, like, incidents lately about me, about black people in general.
Right.
Of, like, kids just kind of making some out-of-pocket comments and some, like, offensive comments.
Right.
Yeah.
And the things that they're saying, are they saying them to you or they're saying them to each other?
Well, some have been said to me.
Okay.
Yeah, and some have been said to each other. Whether that's in English or in Chinese.
Okay.
And I will say my Chinese has at least improved enough. My listening is better than my speaking.
Gotcha, okay.
A million times better than my speaking. But I'm like, you guys, I have to tell them, you guys do realize, like, you don't know how much Chinese I know.
Right.
So you could be saying something to me, or you could be saying something about me, or about maybe the people you see on the board, because I'm very intentional to, like, not necessarily just have white people on the board.
I'm the same way, yeah. I mix it up, absolutely.
Yeah, because I'm like, I don't want them to look at me. Well, one, they're already confused that I'm an American. So I'm like, America's a very diverse place.
Right. Do they have this idea that America's just full of white people?
Yes.
Okay. That's
yes. Blonde hair, blue eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I like to, like, mix it up, too. But sometimes, like, there'll be comments. So, for example, like, around Halloween, I showed them, just because we were talking about haunted houses, so I showed them, like, a YouTube video of, like, Jimmy Fallon and Kevin Hart going through a haunted house, just to, like, make them laugh.
Yeah.
But then, like, a lot of them, like, in Chinese are like, oh, look like a black person. And I was like, okay, like, hold up. Hold up. It's like, I know you're saying literally what you see, but
right.
It's like, again, it's not the most polite thing to just, like, point out people's differences.
Right.
And I try to frame it like, I don't look at you and I'm not like, oh, look at a Taiwanese person, or like, look at your hair, so sometimes that gets them to think, sometimes they're kind of just like roll their eyes and keep going. But yeah, it
sounds like a journey.
Yeah.
It sounds like
it's a lot of patience, a lot of like, oh, okay.
Yeah, and I was telling my friend yesterday that anyone that I've met who is, like, a real, like, teacher by trade and they got their degree in education and education is their passion, even teachers when I was in, like, high school, I feel like people said, oh yeah, I really love elementary school or I really love high school. Yeah. Very rarely did I hear someone say, oh, I love teaching 8th grade, I love 7th graders. It's like, no, they got there because that's kind of what was available at the time, and they took it. They loved teaching. Okay, let me give it a shot. So, do you prefer teaching students of that age?
I will say before I left the U.S., because in the U.S. I worked, because with an ESL certification, usually you're K-12.
Okay.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
so I've worked in all of those. In terms of secondary, which is middle school and high school, I think I actually do prefer middle school.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
Because, but 8th grade, I will say universally,
Yeah.
both in the U.S. and in Taiwan, 8th graders are just like, I don't know how to describe
the worst.
Yes. Yes. Like, I love my students, but also I'm like, why are you being like
this?
that?
Yeah.
you guys, come on.
Yeah.
Like, but yeah, middle school teachers, you have to have like a sweet spot for those kids.
Okay.
That are like in their awkward going through puberty, trying to figure it out phase.
Right.
And I think that's probably why I like middle school, because as like a fresh college graduate, well, twice removed at this point, but I think when you're trying to figure it out, we're kind of like in the same phase of like trying to figure it out. There's like weird and awkward things.
Yeah, you can kind of empathize with that a little bit.
Yeah, but sometimes you're like, guys,
come on.
Yeah. And sometimes I have to sit there and I'm like, you're acting like a 12-year-old, and I'm like, you're literally 12.
Yeah.
Like, you literally are 12, so I have to be graceful with that.
Yeah.
But yes, there are advantages to both.
Okay.
I would be curious to actually see what teaching high school is like in Taiwan. And then elementary, how that would differ, especially with the language barrier, as they're still learning Chinese.
Right, that's the thing, because
Yeah.
I teach Daban kindergarten, so they're like 5 going on 6, and I teach first grade, so they're like 6 going on 7, and I think I'm lucky with my students, because a lot of them have been learning since they were like, Shaoban, Zhongban age, which is like 3 to 4. So for kindergarten and first grade, they understand everything that I say, or if I use a really difficult vocabulary word, then they're like, oh, teacher, what is that? But for the most part, they understand me, so I feel lucky in that sense.
Yeah.
And I know that if they say something to me, usually if it's a little bit borderline or offensive, they probably don't mean it that way.
Yeah.
And I can kind of break it down and explain it in a way that makes them understand what they said was offensive or wrong, or kind of mold and shape their perspective a little bit.
Yeah.
And I know that you said that you've had just a few small, well, I don't know if they're small or big or medium sized, but a few incidences at your school.
Yeah.
So can you give me an example of one, or can you share one that happened?
Well, I can share one because the movie just came out. So regarding Black Panther.
Oh, right. Yes.
I had like a whole bunch of kids who would go up to me and they'd be like, oh, hey, teacher. They'd be like, Wakanda forever.
Yeah.
And then like, ha ha ha, and like run out like at the end of class. So, at the end of class, we have to sign like a teaching diary, just like you sign off that I taught this class.
Yeah.
And sometimes like I'm talking to other students, so like that happens, and I'm like, what was that?
Yeah.
What was that? And I'm like, I don't know if you guys are like doing that because you're like, we know you're black and those are black people, and like here, like this is where we can like this is where
the connection.
Right.
Yeah.
And we're like, because I'm like, I haven't really shared with you guys. I do like Black Panther. Don't get me wrong, I love Black Panther. But I've only shared with one class that is kind of far removed. It's a special class from the other classes I teach. And I know those students don't really interact. Specifically the students that had been doing that. I know they don't interact. So it's like, okay, like I don't think this is like anything offensive or they're trying to be offensive.
Right.
So it's like, oh, okay, like maybe we'll talk about it. And I just remember I brought it up to them and I was like, one, Wakanda's not a real place.
Right.
I hope you know, Wakanda is not a real place.
Yeah.
2, it's in Africa.
And
I was like, my dad's Black American. Sometimes, yes, African American. I know that can be a little confusing.
Yeah.
But my dad and my dad's family is very far removed from our African roots, unfortunately. So it's like, it's not the same. And I tried to tell them, I was like, it's kind of like if I went up to you and I was like, yeah, BTS, K-pop.
Right.
And they were like, what? And I was like, because you're Chinese.
Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with you.
Right.
So they were like, oh, okay. And after that, it kind of like stopped.
It clicked. Okay,
Yeah.
that's good.
Yeah. Because they were like, because there are a lot of K-pop fans in Taiwan.
Yeah, a lot.
Like, because there were boys that were doing it, so they're like, what are you talking about? It's like, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
It has nothing to do with you at
Right.
all. Same thing with this.
Right.
And I was like, I do love Black Panther and stuff, but, sometimes why don't you just, like, ask a question before doing something? Because you don't necessarily know what everything means. And it's okay that you don't know what everything means.
Right.
But maybe let's ask before we just do something.
Right.
Or,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And for your students, have they had, because you said it's middle school.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I'm assuming are they used to having a foreign teacher, or are you one of their first foreign teachers that they've had?
Where I am now, they are used to having a foreign teacher. Now, I think I'm the first person of color.
Person of color, okay.
So that's a thing in itself, but they are used to, like, foreigners.
Okay.
And I very much established that I'm American at that, too. So, and I think their last teacher was American, too.
Okay.
So, yeah, but it's interesting.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And I know we kind of talked, I think we both agree that, especially in public schools, I think it's important that, if they're going to have foreigners come in from whatever country, regardless of what they look like, ethnic background, accent, whatever, that these schools kind of implement something that gets students prepared to have teachers that look like any and everything. Because the way that some students will react to, like a white American, a white South African, versus like a Black American or a Black South African, whatever it is, sometimes it can be very different. And like you said, it's like, oh, okay, well, if they think that America is just full of white people, and you say, oh yeah, I'm American, they're like, really? Like, they're kind of like confused. And so have you, with that Wakanda Forever situation and anything else that happened, did you kind of bring it up to like management or the directors or the principals and say, hey, this happened to me, what can we do?
Yeah, so as we've kind of talked about it, we've been brainstorming kind of like, okay, how can we move forward with this? And we kind of came up with like a little bit of like a policy of just like, talking to the student or students, and if they're with someone who can translate.
Okay.
A lot of times it's better for students to understand in their first language, I think. And like not necessarily that the student's in trouble, but just like, hey, let's think about this. And like I try to really tell them like, words are really powerful, and you are gonna meet foreigners. Even if you just stay in Taiwan your whole life, if you go to university in Taipei, if you go to university in any of like the big cities, you're gonna meet foreigners. Of all shapes, colors, sizes, etc. So while that's amazing, and I want that for you because it's really awesome, like we have to, you're at the age where saying things, your words matter. And even though you don't understand, there are things you can't say to certain people for a variety of reasons. And I would hate for you to, lose a friendship or lose, a connection because of things like that. So like, that's why I kind of want to talk to you about it now. But sometimes it's hard for that to click at that age. Especially when they kind of have no concept of race as much. And I think outside of the US specifically, race is perceived very different. And I think a lot of Americans don't realize that. Like even, like you were talking about, even like in South Africa or even in the UK, or even it's a little bit different than how we talk about race in the US.
Okay, so we're back. We had a technical difficulty, a break, whatever. My battery overheated. But anyway, so we were talking about, what your experience has been like being a teacher over here. Now, do you have any advice for Black teachers who want to come and teach in Taiwan?
Yes. So, one, I just want to say, because we were talking about this for a while.
Yeah, we were.
Taiwanese people are truly some of the nicest, most hospitable people I think on earth.
Yes,
like,
absolutely.
We both have had just experiences where even with a language barrier, even if you can't speak the language or they don't speak English, like they will help you. They'll figure out a way to help you.
Yes.
So first and foremost, I think I want to say to Black teachers, sometimes you will have to deal with like some maybe uncomfortable situations, whether they're like intentionally malicious or not. Just know that that really does not reflect Taiwanese people in any way, shape, or form. So yeah, I think that's the first big one. Is like but I would say maybe one, while this is kind of adding to your load, especially if you're from more of a diverse country, like not a homogenous country, really drive the fact that like you know, there are people that look like you from America, from the UK, from Australia, from wherever, because that's important for the kids to know. And it can be something just as simple as like the pictures you use of just like, even if it's cartoons, like cartoons of people that like look different. Because sometimes I think this can be somewhat of a hard reality for some people, but like you have to kind of know that you're not in the beauty standard, and that doesn't mean you're not a beautiful person. But understanding that and kind of saying, you know, there is beauty in looking different. There is beauty in XYZ, especially when you do have kids who look different. Like when I was in the countryside, we had some darker skinned kids. One, because they're outside more, but also like if they're more indigenous.
Right. Yes, Taiwan does have indigenous people.
Yeah. So that's also important, like to those kids. And with that too, I actually would encourage you, if you're feeling brave enough, to try going to the countryside, or even if you just come into the city, whether that's one of the major cities, whether it's Taipei, Kaohsiung, Tainan, wherever. Go into the countrysides, like be brave to explore Taiwan, because there's like, again, Taiwanese people are just so nice.
They really are.
And I think you'll be really surprised with the amount of hospitality, the amount of like how much people will take care of you, even though you're a non-white foreigner. And there's just going to be certain things, unfortunately, you'll have to jump through some hoops. So I don't know if you went through this in your interview process, but like with me, I think especially because I don't necessarily look black, they kind of double and triple checked that English was my native language. And that wasn't necessarily like a slap in the face to me, because since I'm in this field, we kind of talked about specifically in Asia tends to be like that, but like sometimes they will, and depending on what country you come from too, you might have to go the extra mile to prove like, hey, I am a native English speaker, or different things like that, because sometimes they ask me a few times, and I know like other people in my program specifically, I'm like, I know you weren't asked that question. I know you did not.
So they asked you like, so English is your first language? And they asked it a few more times after that.
Like in like different settings. So like the initial interview, and then like sometimes like as we're like emailing back and forth, and then like I think after my teaching demo. English is English is your first language, because like, you know, multilingualism is a thing in the world now.
Of course.
And there's this whole movement to make like Taiwan bilingual.
But
sometimes that
oh wow, I hadn't even thought about that.
So I would say, especially to people who are mixed race or multi-ethnic or ethnically ambiguous, maybe, you might get that question of like making sure that is, and they'll be able to usually tell too the second you start speaking, based on your accent, but it's still
interesting. Especially since I feel like your accent's very neutral. It's very neutral American.
I try to keep it neutral.
So I think that's what a lot of schools like, either like the neutral American accent or the British accent. Those are like the two most coveted ones over here. So just by the way that you speak, I'm a little bit. But am I really surprised? Am I shocked? No. Am I a little surprised? A little bit. A little bit, just because you know you're it's neutral. So it's like, can't you? Are you listening? Like, couldn't you tell? Okay.
And I will say, because this comes from my background in linguistics too, for specifically Americans and like Black American teachers that are coming, I would say, don't obviously be authentic. Don't necessarily change yourself.
Right. Because I know we as a people, we're used to like code switching and things like that, and Ooh, that's a good one. That's a good point. I don't know if I don't think do I code switch?
I think you
I
probably
don't know. I probably do.
Yeah.
I definitely do. But it's just in a way that no one would really notice it.
Yeah.
I guess because over here if I use certain slang or if I go speak a certain way, they really would. It's like, wait, say that again?
Yeah.
You know, they're not going to get it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
My approach to that is more like, still be authentic. I think it does help with pronunciation and stuff to like keep your accent a little bit neutral to try to. I've been working on this for like a year now, so that's why I think my accent's like this. But sometimes, like, I think the Chicago/Wisconsin accent will really slip. Like a thick Midwestern accent will slip out. But, you know, also don't be afraid wherever you're from to like teach about accents and because I think that's fun for kids to know.
Absolutely.
But then even with code switching, use your own discretion with that. But I think it makes it more engaging for kids if you teach like different slang. Again, use your discretion with that.
Yeah.
You know, it can be fun, but like also keep it appropriate. Keep it appropriate. You know, don't be teaching them stuff that'll get them in trouble. But, but you can, you know, different things here and there. But I think it's fun to teach kids stuff like that. Just sometimes I think people are so scared. Like, I don't know if you have a set curriculum. I make my curriculum, but
I do. I have a set curriculum, but I can teach it however I want. Like with mine, I teach ELA, science, and social studies all in English, and then I love teaching about social studies the most because we have even in our Unit 1 for first grade, it talks about Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks. You know, people like that, and you know, slavery and discrimination and things like that. And while it is quite difficult to break that down for 6-year-olds, especially when it comes to, you know, Ruby Bridges, that was part of it as well. Breaking things down when it comes to like discrimination, prejudice, and you know, segregation. Even explaining that, they're looking at me like, you know, like, we don't really get it. So sometimes I use myself as an example. Like, you know, take me, you know, Ruby Bridges was a little 6-year-old black girl. I was also a little 6-year-old black girl once. So imagine that, you know, maybe I would have to go to this school and then teacher so-and-so who's white would go to that school. And they say, oh, well, what about us? And I thought, that's a great question. I said, good for you. Good for you for understanding that you are not white, because a lot of young Taiwanese students, they think that they're white because their skin is very light. And some of them, their skin is really like white. But I try to explain, you know, racially, I'm like, you know, you are Asian. And, you know, nationally and ethnically, you know, you're Taiwanese. Right? So most of them, I think with that, they get it. And they say, oh, what about us? I'm like, well, you know, they wanted to keep white people over here and everyone else over here. So you probably would have been with me. In the school that was shitty, you know? I don't say that, but you know, I bring it down. Like, oh wow, really? I'm like, yeah, exactly. You know, so, you know, I think with things like that, you know, since they have a black teacher and I've been teaching them for about a year now, they know me. I'm like, well, you know, think about me. Imagine if someone took my freedom away. Imagine if we were over here in the bad school and all the white people were over here in the good school, you know? So, and even when it comes to culture, I show them pictures of American food, American Thanksgiving. I show them pictures of my parents, my house when I was little in New York. And it's a good way to kind of, you know, put the difference up, you know, in picture form with American culture and Taiwanese culture and traditions and things like that. So I try to insert myself into the lesson when appropriate, so that it helps with their understanding a little bit more. And I'm glad that you also brought up the beauty standard thing because I feel like I said it before. A year ago, I had a student try to say that my skin was ugly and, you know, oh, why is this person so black? Why is this person fat? Or why this? Why that? And I think as teachers, we try to correct them when we can. But it's also kind of interesting because, like you said, as people coming from the U.S. and coming into, you know, like a homogenous society, it's kind of like, we knew that coming in, but sometimes I'm sitting, I'm like, oh damn, like I really am. I only Taiwanese people, and it's really crazy because you know the U.S.
Yeah.
Even if you grew up in a predominantly
Yeah.
white or black
Most
or Asian
definitely.
space,
Yeah.
it's still relatively diverse
Yeah.
anywhere you go. So
Yeah.
here I'm like, God damn, it really is
Yeah.
all Taiwanese people.
Yeah.
So for them, so I feel like in the U.S. we can shape mold for ourselves
Yeah.
what beauty really is.
Yeah.
But over here, there's kind of like a one
It's
mold of beauty.
Still like a residue from like colonialism and
Yes,
imperialism.
exactly. And so when they make comments like that, especially from the girls, I'm like, oh baby, like
Right.
you grow,
Right.
you grow up, and you go out west, and you're trying to, you know, maybe you're in university, you're at a party, you're trying to flirt with this guy who, you know, whatever. I'm like, you know, maybe he's gonna be interested in the girl with darker skin,
Right.
with fuller lips, with, you know, a bigger bum, thicker thighs, whatever. What is considered, you know, I think in the West to be like an ideal, you know, body type.
Yeah.
But over here, it's not so much. So when they make comments, I try to correct them, but I also laugh to myself. I'm like, you know what? You're 7 years old now.
Yeah.
I'll give it like 10 to 12 years,
Yeah.
and then like you'll see. You
Yeah.
know, you'll see. So it is interesting.
Especially, I will say, if you don't look stereotypical.
Yeah.
Like, so for me, like, I'm a short, thicker, queer person with short hair. And, you know, as a woman, too, like, when I came, my hair was, like, I had, like, a fade, and it just, like, the top was, and everyone was kind of like, teacher, why is your hair kind of like a boy haircut?
Right. Did they ask you, are you a boy or a girl? Did anyone ask you that? Yeah, I got that too. If you go through my Instagram, when I first came here, my hair was like, I was basically bald. It was super faded, super short. So I was like, oh, teacher, are you a boy or a girl?
These kids will humble you.
They will.
They will
Are you a
humble
boy or a
you.
girl? And I'm like, you don't see.
Right.
You know, they don't know. They think that long means girl and short means boy.
Right.
And it's like, that's why I think our presence is so important.
Right.
Representation is so important.
Right.
So please, if you want to teach or do whatever it is, please come. Because people, children and adults alike, really need to know.
Yeah.
They need to know that we are not a monolith, right? We come in all different
Right.
shapes, colors, sizes, and haircuts.
Yes.
So please.
Yes.
Yes. And do you have, and as a Black woman living over here, right, do you feel like, how do you feel? Do you feel safe? Do you like Taiwan? Like on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of how much you like it, how would you rate it, would you say?
I would say a solid, like, 9 out of 10.
Okay, that's pretty high. That's pretty high.
I would
That's
say.
good. That's pretty high.
Yeah,
Nice.
I do love Taiwan. Taiwan is the only place, and, you know, I might get comments saying, like, oh, don't do this, but, you know, as someone from the U.S., I would never walk around, like, with my headphones in.
Right, yeah.
I always walk around with my headphones in Taiwan.
Yeah,
Obviously,
same.
keep your guard up wherever you are.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, you, especially for women, you can walk alone in an alley at night where it looks a little sketchy, and again, always keep your guard up.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, you don't necessarily have to be like, nah, there is, like, something's gonna pop off.
Right.
Taiwan is very, very safe for the most part, I would say. I don't think I've ever necessarily felt unsafe. Even in the countryside, like, I've had experiences where we're, I don't know if you've been to Changhua.
No, not yet.
We were there for Dragon Boat, and, you know, there was, like, one more bus left. It's, like, 11 at night in the middle of nowhere. And, like, I'm not stressed. And I'm not like, oh, gosh, like, what's gonna happen?
Right.
And there's, like, this sense, I think, in the U.S. of anxiety that, like, is always there when it comes to safety.
Yeah.
And I've noticed when I come here, it's, like, gone down a lot.
Yeah.
Of, like, and we've both talked about, we've had experiences with strangers where that we would never have in the U.S.
Never.
Like, when I moved, essentially some dude was just like, hey, like, I don't know this man, he barely speaks English, but, like, just pay me and I'll give you a ride and I'll move. And I, like, moved with a random man from, like, the northeast corner to kind of, like, central west New Taipei, which is farther than you think. But I'm like, I wouldn't do that in the U.S. without anyone knowing.
Yeah, there's just a different sense of safety and security here, knowing that you can, someone can help you move, you can hop on someone's scooter.
Right. Yeah.
And be pretty confident that nothing bad is going to happen to you. No harm is going to come your way. So it's nice. Even as Black women, it's like, damn, it's pretty nice. You
Right.
don't have to feel safe
Right.
in your surroundings. It's
Right.
nice.
Yeah.
And do you have, because there are some people who might say, oh, I want to come to Taiwan for university, or I want to come and start my own business, or I want to come and do music. So do you have any advice just for Black people or Black women in general, even outside of teaching, when it comes to to Taiwan?
Yeah, I would say, like, honestly, just go for it. You can make connections quite easily out here.
Yeah.
And I would say this is something I'm kind of learning myself, but just like trust the process in general.
Mm-hmm.
So like even if eventually you want to start a business or that's like your intention to come, like trust the process in the sense that, you know, you'll make your connections and then eventually like next thing you know, like you're on a podcast or next thing you know, like you're in like all of these different spaces.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say just come with an open mind, but like take that leap of faith and come. I can only speak from the American perspective, but I think this goes for anywhere of like there is so much more in the world than your home country.
Yeah.
There is so much more in the world than your home country, and obviously with that there's gonna come like cultural differences that you have to be open-minded about and adjust to, which I think is important because sometimes some of those cultural differences can cause this like dissonance in you where you're like, like I don't really know how I feel about that. I don't know if I like that. I don't know all those like different things. But I think if you're like open and you're willing to adjust, it makes it like a smoother process. But yeah, there's just a lot. Well, I wouldn't say necessarily a lot, but there will be cultural differences that you have to adjust to. And again, as long as you're open-minded with it, I think everything will be fine.
Yeah, it should be fine. So if someone stares at you, if someone, you know, asks you a question that you might deem a little bit invasive or offensive, try your best not to beat their ass.
Yeah, because usually it truly does come from a point of curiosity.
Yeah.
Or like it could be trying to like compliment you. So for
for
instance, like my dad is a dark-skinned Black man, and the first time we came to Taiwan, he was wearing Jordans, and you know in Ximen, like right by the exit, there's like the Nike store. So we were walking past that store, and they were in line because I think there was like a new drop for Jordans, and like all of them were like, oh, there's a Black person wearing Jordans right in front of us, and like people were asking him, like people were asking him if he was like Shaq and stuff, and I was like, oh my goodness. So sometimes I think that's their way of trying to relate to you. Like they might compare you to a celebrity.
Yeah.
But that's, I think a lot of times like Taiwanese people are just trying to relate and they're trying to be nice and stuff like that. But sometimes you might be like, what? So.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
Are you Shaq? And you know, what's his name? Dwight Howard is now playing. I think he played last night.
Yeah,
that is so random to me. We talked about that. That is so random. That is so random. I still have questions. In 2023, I'm going to try to get some tickets to see him because that...
You should try and interview him. Dwight Howard, if you
Dwight Howard. That is so funny to me. But yeah, so you know, cultural differences and things, it'll happen. So you know, just be open-minded. Prepared to have to adjust to certain things. I think that's really sound advice.
Yeah.
And I think my last question for you would be, so you've been in Taiwan for, like you said, 1.5 years. This is your second year. Yeah. So how long do you think you'll stay?
I don't know.
That's always the answer I get.
I don't
never really know.
I think Taiwan is a great place. Taiwan's a great place to even just start. I think that is perfect. It's a perfect, and I think it's a really safe environment, specifically outside of the U.S. And I know I keep talking on the American perspective, but outside of the U.S. to start with life abroad. So yeah, I would say no matter how long you're here, you're gonna have really great experiences. Yeah. You're gonna meet amazing people. And I think there's always like gonna be like a part of like Taiwan that's like with you.
Yeah.
Taiwan, I think there's always a place in your heart. There's something specifically to like Black and people of color in America. Like I think one thing you'll realize, especially if you do come to Taiwan, and arguably different countries in Asia, this like there's so much freedom outside of the U.S.
Yes.
In that. So I think that's like my also encouragement. I did research actually on Black experiences in Asia, and we kind of came up. One of my like side thesis was one of the main thesis, but like the American dream, if you will, for a lot of Black people, is more easily found outside of the U.S.
Yeah, I believe that.
And I think Asia is a great place to really kind of experience that. We talk about like life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and so if that like. That's your sign right there to just like go for it.
Yeah.
Go for it.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
I think that about wraps it up.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for watching and listening to another episode of Black Sesame. That wraps it up for today, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.